Hi, everybody. As you probably already know, my name is Yahav, and I was born and raised as an Israeli and as a Zionist. During the past few years, I've gone through the process of questioning the narrative I grew up with regarding this land we live in and the people living on it. This podcast is about voices of the disillusioned. Each episode is a one-on-one heartfelt conversation with an activist who supports the Palestinian struggle, telling the story of the journey that led them to see through what they were taught. Each of these people have their own unique path that I believe anyone can learn from, whether you're a Palestinian or a Jew living here or abroad, or just anyone who feels strongly about this subject. I hope you learn as much as I learned from them about how to build a better future for all people between the river and the sea. Sapir is a community organizer, lecturer, and a law PhD candidate. She is the co-founder of Breaking Walls, a feminist grassroots organization, and the founder of Mizrachion, the People's Archive for Social and Political Movements in Israel. Her work spans legal advocacy, grassroots activism, and feminist community organization, focusing on poverty eradication and support and solidarity between underprivileged populations. She has led campaigns for public housing, projects to protect the freedom to protest, against police brutality, and against the deportation of African refugees and the release of abused women prisoners. Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, I'm tired.
So I feel very privileged to have you agree to come
Thank you.
interview on my podcast. I'm very excited to have you here. And I'll ask you, like I do with everyone, about your background, your family, where did they come from, and what kind of home did you grow up in?
Yeah, so I grew up in Oronit, which is a settlement in the Samaria area, next to Kufr Qasem. It's like a community, small city, you can say.
It's a small town.
It's a small town, yeah, that was built, back then it was, half of the town was inside of the 67 borders, and half of it was outside.
So half of it was in the West Bank, and half of it was in what's called like sovereign Israel.
Yes, and then it kind of expanded during the years.
Into the West Bank.
Yeah, into the West tremendously. Yeah, so I grew up to a family that was Mizrachit, Mesortit, like right-wing in a mainstream, I guess, basic way. Not extremist, not very religious. I see them as like most of the right-wing families that a lot of my friends grew up with.
Mm-hmm. And when you say, just for people who are not familiar with this, Mizrachim are Jews that came from Arab-speaking countries, Muslim countries.
Yeah, my grandparents from my mom's side, they came from Iraq, from Mosul during the 50s. And the other side, so my father, both of his parents were born and raised in Tel Aviv, in Israel before 48. There are several generations in Israel.
And so you say your family was like pretty traditional, but not like very, very conservative?
No, not at all. Like, I still see myself like that. I believe in God. I practice whatever I feel suitable to practice, I guess. And they, it's the kind of families, and it's this format that you do Kiddush in Shabbat.
Like you bless the wine, which is like very standard.
Yeah, you watch TV, and then you go on Saturday morning in Shabbat to the beach.
So it's kind of like keeping some of the traditions, but also not like going all the way.
Yeah, and it's very recognized and familiar with those Mizrahi families, the ones that came from the Arab and Maghreb countries, where they believe, but they practice in I want to say more chilled way. They're not orthodox, and they don't consider themselves, and they're not connected to that kind of practicing of Judaism.
So they're not very strict.
No.
you grew up in a family that was non-political, like voting right-wing, but not really having a conversation about it at home.
Yes, we had like political discussions, but there wasn't a big ideology, I guess, behind it. And I remember that I was like 14 or something. I wanted to go. There was the settlements in Gaza, in Gush Katif. There was this evacuation of them. 2005, I was 14, 15. It was summer and I wanted to go to protest against the evacuation, yeah. And my dad, even though he didn't thought that they should be evicted, he really was against it.
He didn't want you to be too political, too involved.
He didn't want me to be too political, and didn't want me... The political conversation was from a social lens and not very political, talking about the right-wing ideology. So like, even though I grew up in a settlement, on paper, my parents didn't move there because ideology. It was like many others to improve their livelihood so they can be middle class.
Yeah, it's very ironic that you wanted to go protest against the evacuation of settlements in Gaza, and fast forward like 20 years and you're protesting against people trying to block the aid trucks going to Gaza.
Yes, but I do, I spoke about it with my dad yesterday. I asked him about it, if you remember why I wanted to go. And I think what we were talking about is that I felt bad that they're getting evicted from their homes. I didn't know that it was someone else and they just took it. All I thought about is that, they're what are they going to do?
Like they're not going to have a home now that they're being evacuated.
Yes.
That's interesting because fast forward to your activism later on. So you were pretty standard teenager, you could say.
Yes.
Living in like the mainstream, kind of mild right-wing Mizrachi community.
Yes, like I was very involved in the scouts. I had like good grades. I went to, I guess, good schools.
And when you were 16, you came out of the closet as a lesbian.
Yes.
Which was pretty early at that time. This was like, what, 2006?
For millennials, I think it's early. Yes.
For millennials, it's
for
early.
For millennials, Gen Z, there's something else. But for us, yeah. Yes, I knew from a very early age that I'm different, that my sexual orientation was different, even though that obviously I didn't have the word for that to describe what that means, but I did know how I feel. And I think the realization of that was when I was 5, maybe. And from that on, I grew up feeling different. I grew up knowing that there's something else that is not suitable and it's not the norm. I am having those discussions with my friends, but we definitely don't see eye to eye, consider to boys and other issues related to that. So I was very aware of that from an early age. And when I was 16, I told my parents, my friends, and I kind of started to get out and be a bit more involved in that arena.
And during your high school years, you were very much encouraged by the school to go serve in the army, but by your home to serve as least as possible. How does that kind of like go together?
I think the message I got at home was that, I need to like fulfill myself, like to try to do as much as I can. Not only about the army. I think that the pressure about the army was mainly from the group of friends in the scouts and in high school, but at the same side I didn't get a lot of pressure from my family or something like that to do this extremely meaningful service or to be a combat soldier or something like that, and you have to go to the army. It's just something that you do
because it's like the law, so you do it. But then
because you have to do it because it's considered a basic thing. Like
your basic duty for your society.
Yes, but more than a basic duty, it's a basic thing in the society. It's just something that you do. You don't think about it a lot. But I don't think it was something that I was pressured to from my family. It's more, the family in a way is irrelevant in that sense of the whole society is pushing you for that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all discussed, and you learn from a very early age that this is the army is your way to contribute to your society. And I was involved in the scouts, I was involved in all kinds of things of the way I don't feel like that now. I have a different political views, but back then I felt that I'm like contributing to the community. So for me there was a connection between supporting the community to supporting the state, and the connection was the army.
Yeah. And you didn't know anyone who didn't enlist in the army.
I didn't know that you can refuse to go to the army. Start with that.
Mm-hmm.
That you can just say, no, I don't want to. It's even an option. And I also, when I knew someone that left the army, it was because of like mental reasons. And that was like a neighbor of mine. We were like very involved. She was a bit older than me. She was like, one of those freaks that we called them in high school, at least back then. She didn't have a lot of friends. She didn't like a community the same as me. So I felt like, okay, if she left the army or she was kicked out, I didn't know what's the story is really about. But if it happened, it's because she really like mentally ill.
Because she's a loser, not because she's politically aware.
Yeah, because she's a loser, because she's not suitable to contribute to the society. She's not like me.
She's a misfit, and that's why she's not there.
Yes. Yes.
I very much connect to that. I think the few kids in the community where I grew up in that didn't serve in the army all had something in common. They were all like the losers. Yeah, it's very much linked in your head when you're a teenager, being a loser to not going to the army, and being a winner or a go-getter or an A-type with going to the army and actually succeeding in your service.
Yes. For me, even I knew that there's something wrong with me. I guess, I don't know, in a sense of that I knew that, that there's going to be two options. I'm really going to be successful in the army. Like I'm going to be an officer. Maybe I'll have like a military career or something. Or that it's going to be a completely misfit and it's going to be terrible. So while everyone was very excited going to the army, I was very afraid. And I didn't really have the space to share it with anyone. And I felt that if I'm saying something about it or even thinking about it, it's because I'm spoiled.
And then you began your military service and knew from the get-go that this was not for you.
Yeah, like I enlisted on Thursday. I came back home on Friday. And it took me a day to realize that it's not for me. I knew that I'm going to have the weekend, and then it's going to be basic training. So it's going to be a while, not being at home. And I realized that I'm going to be there in that structure, wearing the uniform, obeying orders that I'm not sure how are they relevant to me, and if someone even sees me as a human being anymore. And I felt that I'm like trapped in something that is terrible for everyone, but especially for me, and that I don't want to be there, and I don't trust the system. Even though I was, I didn't have like backlash with systems before that. I didn't need it to, not really. But then in the army, it was something different. And when I enlisted, I knew that I'm gonna be like a commander. That was the training for. And this is like for the quality girls, for the good girls that know what they're doing. Most of them were before in some kind of a youth movement. And they were all kind of from the same background.
Like you were in the scouts, you were like a counselor, you had these like skills of like to be a basic training drill sergeant.
And that's why it was very weird for me. And I think also for the rest of them, because I was started to kind of resist from the day after to this whole idea of army, because they didn't know why.
Like they didn't understand what your problem was.
No. And I also wasn't sure what my problem is, because that's supposed to be, if I grew up with that background, coming from this background, grew up in this environment, the army is for me. It's literally for me. So how come I'm resisting? How come it's hard for me? How come it's difficult for me? Why do I don't want to obey the orders? Why don't I want to fit in? And all I felt is that I'm prefer to die and not fit into this system.
It was that bad. You preferred to die.
Yeah.
There wasn't any way out. That wasn't death.
For me, it wasn't any way out. It was kind of realizing how I can cry for help. But I didn't thought, and in fact that was true, that anyone is listening. Like the system is so concentrated on creating good soldiers that they don't want to give up on you. It's for them, I feel now looking back, it's better that you give up on your own life than they give up on you as a soldier.
And that's what your commander told you in basic training, right? She was like, I've never had a soldier that I've given up on. You're not going to be the first.
Yes. And even though it was very clear that I'm suffering and that the army is not for me, for many reasons, it wasn't discussed even that there is any other option. Now I'm looking back and I'm saying, maybe I wasn't a political person back then, but I did have like political roots somehow, because I didn't refuse to be in the army in a sense of because of the occupation or other issues, but just the idea of being in the army and losing your humanity during that.
You're losing your individualism also.
Yeah. Even though I wasn't, a combat soldier, I was like in a base in the center of Israel. Even wearing the uniform was such a terrible experience for me that I got so depressed so soon and I felt trapped. Because as I said, you don't know that there's a way out. And honestly, there isn't really a way out. Like to actually get out of the army, you're paying all kinds of prices.
You're going to pay some kind of price.
You're going to pay some kind of prices, yes. And it's not something that you're aware of or that you're just a kid. So during that basic training, it wasn't for a while that I was, trying all kind of ways to cry for help. And before coming back to the basic training, after one day in the army, it was Saturday night and I was terrified. I was terrified because I knew that I don't belong and I didn't understood why. That's the thing, I didn't understood why.
You had like a gut feeling that was very strong that you shouldn't be there.
That I shouldn't be there. And then it wasn't a while, then I was trying to talk with the commanders, try to do something, but I felt so bad and so depressed that I end up trying to commit suicide. I still don't know if I was actually trying to hurt myself or just to be vocal about the fact that I really, really don't want to be there. But it was, standing on an aisle, trying to jump. And I guess that if I really wanted to, I could. I waited for someone to stop me. And someone did. And then it took a while. It took months before I managed to actually leave the army. But that was a tipping point.
Like, wait, even after you tried to commit suicide and one of the commanders saved your life, like prevented you from doing it?
Yeah, prevented me. I don't know if he actually saved my life because I still don't know if I had the courage to actually jump. But yeah, even after that, they took me. There's like an officer for mental health to speak with her. And when I was there, I met someone else that was also really struggling, one of the other soldiers.
She was like waiting in line to go speak to the officer.
Yes. Yeah, we were sitting there and talking, and it was also clear that she's very upset and it's very hard for her from different reasons maybe, but that she doesn't belong, that she's not getting the help she needed. And yeah, after that, I spoke to them and they were like, it's okay, like you're gonna get over it, you're a good kid, you're not
one of those losers.
Yeah, you have like your whole future. It's not that easy to get off the army. It's not for you. Sometimes people are struggling. That's okay. And they didn't assist me at all. They didn't even tell my parents.
They didn't tell your parents that you tried to commit suicide?
They didn't. I'm not even sure what I told them, my parents, afterwards. It took us a while to actually speak about that. But my parents knew that I was very depressed. They could have seen it. That I stopped eating. I stopped laughing. I stopped being myself. So after that, I actively stopped participating So they will kick me out of this basic training, hoping that I'll finish and someone like release me. But it didn't work out like that. And then I had another basic training all over again from start.
They sent you to another basic training?
Yes.
They thought that would work.
Yes. And actually, when I was there, the army experience was, as a whole, was extremely bad. But because I went from like being in a basic training of these quality girls, from that to the losers, the ones that didn't know where they're gonna be, they went to this like very basic training,
like the general basic training for all the people.
Yeah, they didn't know, like they were from neighborhoods, they were like suddenly like Mizrachi and Ethiopian, and it was a mix, and some of them were like from poverty neighborhoods and from the periphery. I want to say it was kind of like communities that I wasn't engaged before because they didn't have the opportunities also. And then for me, the experience is that I kind of like extremely bonded with them. And we were all kind of like against the army.
Against the system.
Yeah, against the system. And they didn't, again, I'm not sure if they saw it as like political reasons, but they were also like, how come those Ashkenazi soldiers giving us orders? It was suddenly this discussion that I wasn't familiar before. And suddenly they were speaking about their life in the neighborhoods and about poverty and things like that. And we really shared some things. And
was this the first time you were exposed to Mizrachi discourse?
In that sense, I think, yeah. I think that it was the first time that I had some time to be familiar and to be friends with, and to hear those different perspectives coming from their different life experiences that I might experience myself, but I didn't had the community to talk with about it, because I didn't grow up in a political atmosphere, and it was all, we're like middle class in all kinds of ways, lower middle class,
Your family basically had the chance to kind of mobilize up to a middle class environment as Mizrachim because they moved to this, basically a settlement.
Yes.
And these people were not. These people grew up in poor neighborhoods, in cities, and they were also Mizrachim or anyone who's not like the elites.
Yes.
And after this basic training, you were sent to a position as like in a spokesperson office.
Yes, and I kind of urge to get this position because I said, okay, if I'm staying, so I'm going to do something valuable. So like was really campaigning for that position and like insisted getting that position because I said, okay, if I'm decided not to be a loser, I'm like,
I better be a winner all the way.
Yeah. It's not something that you're aware of, but it's you're subconscious that you're going to do something meaningful. And when I started, I kind of tried to convince myself that, it's just I was a bit spoiled in the beginning. It was a bit hard for me to get by. It's always hard for me in like new structures, new organizations, changes.
You're just like gaslighting yourself.
Yeah, I was trying, definitely, yes. And others helped, of course, also to do this kind of gaslighting. Yeah, and I went there and I was trying to be committed to the purpose, to Hasbara of the IDF. But then I noticed pretty much in the beginning that they are lying. And it wasn't like big lies, they didn't lie about, it's not like the IDF is lying about what's happening right now in Gaza or something like that.
It's not like they're saying something that completely didn't happen. It's that they're giving different details about something that did happen.
No, it was more than that. It's just, I remember that I came, so the basic training I did like in a specific camp. They I don't know, they had like cockroaches and it's like stupid things, but like they had like, I saw cockroaches and mouses and things like that in the kitchen. I knew that there was a problem with sanitation. And then there was like an article about it, and they asked the response of the army, and I needed to write the response. So to get it. And I told them, like, I know that there is, like, you're not going to solve it or something. And they were like, no, you should write that there isn't. And I was like, but I was there. I know that there is something wrong. And it was like such a stupid thing, you know, it's not.
It's not like the moral stuff and the oppression and occupation. It's like a small thing.
It's just these basic things. But from even this basic thing that we were discussed, and afterwards, different things like that, I felt that, what is this system? You know, this is the moral values.
Like, if they're lying about this, what else are they lying about?
Yes. Like, why won't you want to fix it? You know, I think it's a very naive approach, you know, from someone that grew up in a certain way, but it was a very naive approach, thinking that if they're getting any kind of criticism, no matter why, no matter how, they actually want to fix it because we're the most moral army in the world.
So we probably should be fixing things that are wrong instead of just giving responses that they're not a problem.
And then it continued like that. Then there was 2 like major episodes related to Gaza and the policy of the IDF.
This was like 2009, 2008, 2009.
Yeah, 2009, 2010, I think. There was the flotilla to Gaza. And then the IDF kind of like really jumped on the ship, and there was all kinds of things that's happening. And I saw it again from a very naive perspective, thinking, but like, why? They're like protesting, like, why? Even though I wasn't part of one protest in my entire life back then. I was like, why are they treating them like that? And I wanted to know more about why those people from all over the world decided to go to this adventure, as I thought back then, and what's going on in Gaza.
It's not only a protest. It was actually, they were trying to get humanitarian aid to Gaza.
Yes.
As well.
Yes.
Which is also interesting, connected to fast forward.
Fast forward, yeah. So I thought, why there is need to humanitarian aid in Gaza? What's going on there?
Because we didn't even know at the time what the siege really meant.
We didn't know at all. And then we were discussing about it in the office, and I was like, no, I think what the IDF did was wrong. And everyone was shocked, obviously. And then at the same time, there was a case of someone named Anat Kam. She was an Israeli soldier, and now she's a journalist. And she was the secretary of someone like in high command or something like that. And she leaked documents to Haaretz newspaper. And those documents exposed that the army, against international law and against what they told to officials, they are continuing doing this policy of, they call it knock on the door, I think, something like that.
Knock on the roof.
Knock on the roof, yeah. There was knock on the roof and knock on the door. It's a policy when they're using, if it's a knock on the door, they're using the neighbor of the one, you know, the Palestinian household that they want to intervene. They want to see if he's at home. They want to go inside to evacuate to his home. So they're using his neighbor, forcing him to go to knock on the door and maybe hiding behind him or something like that. And the knock on the roof is that when they're throwing pamphlets from the sky saying you have like 1 minute or 2 minutes to evacuate. So then we were also discussing about it in the office.
About her leaking the documents.
And that it's terrible and she deserves to go to prison and that.
Which she did, by the way,
Which she did, by the way, but not for long. And I said, but like, what's the problem? The problem is what they did. They lied and it's something that they shouldn't do in humanitarian law. Also, I think I said something like, it's not cool to do something like that, you know. It's not cool, but it's not okay to do something like that. And I don't understand what's wrong. And I remember at the same time, I needed to go to like this classification process to see if I can be exposed to more like more confidential, more sensitive documents. And they asked me all kinds of questions, and in the end they said, no, you're not suitable for that. And I was like, why? Like
because
I was honest. They were like, no, we don't think
we don't need honesty.
No, it's not good that you will see like all those documents. I think it's and from that on, I understood how my perspective about how you need to about even if there is a need to an army, how the army should be, and that it's not that moral, and what the fuck is a moral army actually? What does that even mean? And I started to really to think about it and got depressed all over again about why am I even here? Why am I wasting my time for that? Is it beneficial for someone in my society that I'm here doing this job, waking every morning, going to this base, talking with those people, giving those comments about things that I know that they're a lie? And even if they're not a lie, I don't agree with them. So how can I do a work that I disagree with morally? And I remember that one day I came, I think it was after 7 months or something of being in the army as a soldier. And one morning I came to the base, I entered to the office. There was some people discussing. And I just instantly, I left, took my stuff, I left. I went to the beach and I never came back. I called them and I told them like, I'm not coming anymore. That's it. And, even then, and then it was a huge process going out of the army. It was a big deal. They talked with my parents several times, trying to convince them to pressure me not to leave the army. They told me that they will take my driver's license. They told me that no, there is not going to be any university that will accept me.
That will ruin your future, basically.
Yes, that I'm ruining my future, that I won't get a job anywhere, and all kinds of things. And in that stage, I was like, at least I have a future. Like, if I'm going to continue being here, I will not have any kind of future because I'm not going to be alive anymore. I don't want to be here anymore. That's it for me. I don't care what are the circumstances. I don't care what are the prices. I know physically, mentally that I can't be here anymore. I don't want to wear those uniforms anymore. I don't want to come here every morning. I don't want to be involved in this system anymore. I don't believe in the basic values of what that you're representing.
But this is all without knowing anything about the occupation.
Anything at all, without being with Palestinians in any kind of political involvement, without having any leftist friends at all. It was all, I think, from my messed up inside that I really didn't want to be there. And I even, you're thinking about, you were asking before, how come that you try to commit suicide and then they just let you continue?
Yeah, like after trying to commit suicide, you should be released. You should be released.
You should be hospitalized. You should be something.
Sent to therapy.
Yeah, something. Yeah. And then they didn't do anything with me. They just gave me back my weapon. And I said, no, I don't want it. And a few months afterwards, also, I was supposed to be sent to guard. Don't remember where, in the checkpoint. I don't know where it was something. And I remember talking with my commander, and she was like, you have to go. This is your assignment now. And I told her listen, I'm not taking a weapon. And she said, no, you have to. And I told her for me and for you, for both of our sake, I don't want to be around weapon. I don't want to hold a weapon. I don't want to be around weapon. I definitely don't want to be alone in the dark in some checkpoint or something with a weapon. And I refused going. And people are saying, okay, you can just refuse to go. No, it's not like that. I refused to go. I insisted on that. I knew that there was a good chance that they would send me to prison. And I said, anyway, I'm not going. And if my parents didn't back me up, I'm not sure how I was able to do that. Because going back to the story, when I was waiting to the mental health officer to accept me after what I was trying to do, waiting with someone that was also suffering and was also threatening. She didn't try to do anything, for what I know back then, also threatening to kill herself because she didn't want to be in the army. After a few months, I heard that she did it. I knew that she did it.
She committed suicide.
They gave her a weapon. She was alone. She committed suicide, and everyone was like, how did it happen? She told you a lot of time that it's going to happen. You needed to listen to her. So I remember even thinking about her, and even that, knowing about it, influenced me so much that I said, no, but I want to leave. I don't want to be in that position anymore. I don't want to continue being in a structure that forcing me to think that this is the only way out, being like everyone else, or to stop existing. And I left, and then I went to do like this, I still had this sense that I have to contribute somehow in an organized way, not in activism, because it's not a concept that I knew back then. And then I went to be, I completed the time needed. I needed like 2 years, so I completed the time, and I was kind of doing like national service in a school. So that was that. And just before I finished that service, national service, it was 2011, the summer of 2011, and the social protests started. What we call the 10 protests in the state. It was Occupy Wall Street.
Social justice protests.
Yeah, the Arab Spring. It was all at the same time. It was 2011. That was when I started to be an activist.
So you joined this political kind of uprising, you could say. And most people were older than you. Like the people representing the different encampments around the country were mostly older than you, but you were like a representative of one of the encampments.
Yes, I was 20. And in the beginning, I just went to Rothschild Boulevard in Tel Aviv, which was the main space when there was this like 10 protest people were organizing. And at start, I was there just putting my tent, going in the morning, taking a bus to the school and then coming back and getting involved a bit. I didn't know anyone that went there, but I just felt that I need to be there. I'm not even sure why. I think I felt like, okay, they're talking about prices of rent. I'm going to be a student soon. I don't want to continue living at home. I had this dream as someone that grew up on the L Road as a lesbian. I was like, I want to move to Tel Aviv. I want to live the lesbian dream, like in L Road, like they did in LA, which is definitely not happened for me. And it's definitely, I didn't have the money to live the life like in the L Road. But I was like, okay, I'm going to move to Tel Aviv. So I want to be like, and I can't pay rent. So we have to kind of figure it out. So I was joining the protest. And then I became the representative of encampment in another city close to where I used to live. And then kind of like connected to a lot of people and became more involved and people knew me and started to know me a bit more and got like a bit more public attention and started to bond with all kinds of groups. But it was especially with the groups of the homeless, because we were talking, okay, there was these tents, sometimes there's going to be winter, everyone going to go home. We succeeded, didn't succeed. I'm not sure even what success means in that sense, but anywhere they're going to stay.
So all these people, protesters, decided to go form encampments for the protests, but you knew that the homeless people wouldn't have anywhere to go back after this is all over, and that's why you connected to them.
Yes, I connected. It was the opposite way around. I just connected to them when I was there. They were like, I discovered that they're also kind of like a community. They know each other and they kind of find a community also with the people in the Rothschild Boulevard, because it's in central Tel Aviv, so they were all around there. There was food, there were all kinds of activities, there was shade during the summer and water, which is very important. So they became part of that. And then with a few more people, we started to think about, okay, what's going to happen for them?
What's going to happen the day after?
And from that, I kind of connected thinking about what does it mean that you don't have a shelter, that you don't have a safe roof over your head. And I remember I saw there was like call to action. There was encampment in Atikva neighborhood, which is where I live right now since 2011, kind of. It's in South Tel Aviv, and it's also considered like a social periphery, Mizrachi communities, and then different communities. Now there's a lot of refugees and all kinds of communities. So I think it's one of maybe the most diverse neighborhoods in Israel, I guess. Yeah. And so there was like just this call to action and just asking people to bring clothes to the families that were there. There were single moms and there were ex-prisoners and families, we say like blessed with children, but like families with a lot of children, and all kinds of refugees also, all kinds of communities there, that they actually didn't have any place else to go. So they were actually living, most of them, in the tents. And I saw this call to action. I told my dad, like, maybe we should go bring some stuff. And then I instantly connected with people and connected to the conversation that really fast became from a conversation of poverty in a perspective of charity to a perspective of human rights or basic human rights, or the right to housing, to proper housing, and to live in dignity. So I became very involved there. We had this group of all kinds of, we call it like the periphery cities, periphery tents. There was all kinds of it was in unrecognized villages in the south, Bedouin villages, and it was in Jaffa. There was Palestinians there that were part of it, and it was all over.
It's interesting that while the main encampment was in Rothschild Boulevard, which is where a lot of the more privileged people went, all the social periphery encampments kind of intuitively knew to kind of connect to each other for very different communities.
Yeah, you know, there were activists working on it from the communities, and they were like actively trying to connect those communities together, to fight together. So there were demonstrations together, there were demonstrations and all kinds of direct actions, and to bring even the conversation of public housing and the right to housing.
Because this all started from the cost of living.
Yes.
And so from talking about the cost of living, you kind of shifted, especially in these circles, to talking about, okay, but where does the cost of living come from when it comes to marginalized communities?
Yes.
It comes from a deliberate policy.
Yeah, and just for you to understand, it wasn't just different perspective back then between the mainstream and us. We were actively going to the big demonstrations, the big rallies, even like burgeoning into the stage, forcing them to give us the microphone to speak about our issues. It was a whole thing. And I saw how this whole thing, it didn't took me a long time to realize the gaps and the policies affected by that, and the way that people are affected by the gaps and the policies, and how come we have this mainstream in Rothschild and we have those other groups in different places, and how come those groups have certain ethnicity and a class
and certain
background, and how come there were people there that were 10th, 3rd, or something reason 4th generation to poverty. How did it happen? Even speaking about it, I didn't know before what is public housing. I wasn't involved, I wasn't in that environment. And then talking about public housing, saying like, okay, it makes sense that we have it. And how come it's not something that everyone can have? Why only the ones that are extremely living in poverty and fighting poverty? So then we kind of forced ourselves to the mainstream, and pretty much in the beginning of my activism, I found myself, and since then, but I found myself in those very underprivileged issues, communities, those unsexy stuff to do, the ones that you have to insist all the time to get any kind of budget. You have to insist that your voice will be heard. And it was back since then with all different communities. But that was the beginning of me realizing, even speaking about human rights, it became from the Mizrachi conversation, and it started from talking about the right of housing. And then back then we were talking about the right to housing, and it was the right to housing to Mizrachi communities. For Mizrachi community, it was the Palestinians in Jaffa, right? Because it makes sense. They're living in the same city. How come they will have and they won't have? From that, it was, okay, so why they're demolishing the houses of Bedouin communities, and why is their village is unrecognized? Why? Like, I came there, I'm saying that it's just a desert. why someone like why also from this naive perspective, but like why would someone care about them? Why they're not interfering anyone. It's like they're sitting on their land.
And why not connect them to water?
Yeah, why not connect them to water? How come every time they're building these shacks, the army and the police coming and bring them? So I didn't realize that logically. I didn't realize that. It reminded me that we're talking about the army before, that I got all kinds of orders and I didn't realize what's the logic behind it. And because I didn't realize the logic behind it, I said, okay, so I don't want to do it. So it was the same. I didn't realize what's the logic and how come that people can protest about right of housing if they're privileged enough, but they don't care if someone has that is less privileged will have the same right. And if they do care about it, how come they say, okay, for Jews, yes, we're going to protest for them or we're going to protest with them, but we're not going to do it for the Palestinians. So that all kind of like my political mind perspective extremely shifted really fast because I was doing intense activism, but I also kind of got familiar with different communities and it all connected to me from the same sense of if there is a right for housing for everyone, so it's for everyone. If you're not thinking about it like that, you're a hypocrite. You're kind of like in discourse with yourself, because if you open your eyes to different struggles and your eyes are widely open, you can't come back. If you're coming back, so you're not honest with yourself about the actual political situation and the way you need to organize to be in actual solidarity and to have this holistic political perspective, not just for yourself, not just for your specific community.
And you were 21 years old by now, going to these protests against evacuations of families from their homes,
yes,
and things like that. And you started being exposed to police brutality.
Yeah, it was, I remember, I think the first time I was arrested, I'm not sure how many times afterwards, I guess a lot, but I was 21, it was the first time I got arrested, and it was just a protest here in this neighborhood, like 5 minutes from where we're sitting. It was a protest against the evacuation of the encampment that was in a public garden in Tel Aviv. And I knew that those people that actually don't have any place to go. And what the city did is to bribe them. They told them like, you're going to get like 10,000 shekels for rent. And they knew that people really needed that. But then you need to sign on a document saying that you can't protest anymore. You won't come here anymore. You won't set up a new encampment. You won't gonna protest. You're not gonna write anything on social media. It was like that.
It's like when you want to clean your room, but you don't have time. So you just like shove all the clothes and the shoes in the cupboard.
Exactly.
And then you just close the doors. And you know that when you're going to open it, it's going to all fall out.
Yeah. And then
but you don't care. You're just like, I don't have time. I'm just going to,
It's this strategy that they do. It's this strategy like that they do. Yes. When there's when those encampments, even now when they're getting a bit like public attention. They're saying, okay, like take these vouchers for a few months and then, get by. And then what happened after a few months? They're back in the same spot. But yeah. So I was shocked by that, like by the way they acted.
I'm shocked. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, and by the way they decided to do something like that, like the government and the city is doing something like knowingly they don't have any place to go. And not solving the issue. And I thought that if they knew about it, they will fix it. Again.
That's the same naive thought.
Yeah, again. I even remember that before this evacuation, we went to the Knesset to talk with members of the Knesset, to talk with ministers. I even approached Prime Minister Netanyahu, that was still Prime Minister back then. I think my entire life, in a way. And approached to him and gave him these pamphlets. And I thought, okay, now the Prime Minister knew he's going to fix it. I'm always telling it in lectures, for people to realize how naive I was and how I became so political because I got so disappointed realizing that they knew. Now I said, okay, now they know they're gonna fix it. But then I said, okay, now they know, but they're not fixing it. So what's going on?
Because they knew beforehand as well.
Yeah. Did they knew all along? Is this a policy?
It's not because they didn't know.
Yeah, is this a policy? And then when I said, okay, like now it's a policy, I get it now. So I said, okay. So there's something now.
It's deeper.
Yeah. I need to think about it. Like things, I need to think about everything I grew up on because it's not okay.
And you also experienced police brutality.
Yeah, and then when we were trying, before I said we were trying to kind of stop the eviction in all different ways, including going to the Knesset and doing all kinds of demonstrations. But then in the final demonstration, we went and I said, okay, it's just, Jews, mainly Jews in Tel Aviv, protesting for the right of housing. It's not something that I feel it's like
so controversial.
Yeah, or provoke someone or something like, again, basic. For me, it was basic. I know that for other people, it was like, no, but for me, it was extremely basic. And then the police, the encounter with the police and the police brutality and the arrests and the way they acted and how they published afterwards, announcements saying that we attacked them. And I was like, no, we're not. Like, what are you talking about? And then I said, okay, the police lie also.
Not only the military.
Yeah, not only the military, the police lie also. It sounds so ridiculous thinking about it now and talking about it now, but it's just, this whole podcast is about how do people understand that how do they even manage to be politicized and think differently on the way they were raised. So that's why I'm like trying to be very honest about it, saying that it was random in a sense of, I just said, no, there wasn't a police brutality, and no, I didn't attack anyone. Why are they accusing me? Something like that. How people in the first arrest, I always see it because I'm a lawyer. I'm representing in many arrests. So I see when someone is getting arrested for the first time, they're insulted, feeling that it's like on them. They're did
surprised.
Something wrong. Yeah, and I was like, it's not on you. They don't care about you specifically.
They do it to everybody. It's not just you.
They do it to everyone. Now try to realize, what does it mean that they're doing it to everyone?
And everyone means not only Jews.
Yeah. And then when I exposed something like that and I got arrested and I saw how my friends are beating up for something that, again, was so basic, I said, okay, like now I'm more open to understand what's going on in the West Bank, other places, that I had friends that were talking about those issues before, that
about the occupation.
About the occupation, yeah, they were leftist activists that were involved with me, but I didn't have their political opinions. They were involved, they were activists before the protest. And they were talking with me about it, and I said, no, I don't want to engage. I don't see how it's relevant.
It's not connected.
It's not political, how people say it's not political, it's not related to that. Don't bring politics to that, And then I said, okay, like, I think I want to see in my own eyes what's going on.
Because you realize that if the police brutality is being directed at you guys, Jews in Tel Aviv, then it's probably also being directed to Palestinians in the West Bank.
So what is going on with Palestinians? And there isn't that, positive feelings, that call it like that, as some had towards us, some, not a lot. But yeah, it really shifted my mind and I wanted to go and see it. And again, this naivety continues because I'm going to Hebron and I'm going to see, it was a tour, but it was like with a political group back then that was called Tarabut, Itchabrut. And I went because there were activists, some of them were my friends, and they were also really involved in the public housing protest and campaigns. So I went to Hebron and I'm meeting people there and I'm seeing the occupation for the first time. So people will say, but like you grew up in a settlement, so how come you didn't saw the occupation before? I didn't saw it because it didn't influence me. So that's why I didn't saw it.
You also didn't grow up in the heart of the West Bank. You were really on the outskirts.
It wasn't heart of the West Bank.
You didn't even know that it was in the West Bank. You didn't have to go through a checkpoint.
One day they built the wall.
On the eastern side of where you grew up.
Yeah, and then there was a wall. And then one day I saw some activists from Peace Now back then coming to, there was like blocks, not a checkpoint, but like blocks of concrete. And then I saw them. I remember as a child, they were like painting, this writing peace, and they were painting a dove holding an olive branch. And I was like, okay, nice, like a nice painting. Like I didn't experience that. And we had like bulletproof buses. I thought that everyone had bulletproof buses. I didn't know that you can just drive in a normal bus. So I didn't really experience that. And we also grew up next to Kfar Qasem, a Palestinian village, but with the residents are...
Inside 48.
Yes, inside 48. They have citizenship. And my dad, he has his shop. He's like doing aluminum and construction. And so he has a shop there. And, I was just spending a lot of time there. So I didn't feel that even. So then, for me, being in Hebron, it was the first time that I saw, okay, this is the occupation that everyone is talking about. There's something like that I can't resist. Before then, I wasn't even open to talk about the occupation, to say the word. It was like abomination to say something like that. And then I'm there seeing the settlers, and I saw them and they were so smug. And I thought like, why are they so smug talking like that to someone that looks, to a Palestinian that looks like my grandfather, a Palestinian, because my grandfather is Iraqi. So, there are similarities, of course. They're both Arabs. So I saw how we acted and how they kind of blocked the way. And then the stones over the market. And the Palestinians that are scared there, and I said, why are they scared? It's like their city, their market. Why is it an issue? And then we went to meet, there was a Palestinian grandma. Again, I see her, I see my grandma. I cannot let go of the personal connections, the personal feeling of seeing someone and looking at her like she's my family, even though she's supposed to be my enemy. But I see her and she looks like family, and it's messing me up. And I'm talking with her, and she's telling how the settlers are trying to evict her, and I'm thinking, why? Like, why do there are people that supporting it? She's getting evicted from her home. How is it any different from someone in Tel Aviv or in Jerusalem or in Haifa getting evicted from his home in public housing? Why? So I don't know. It really messed me up. And then in the end, and that was something that really like was the top of it all, that we spontaneously went to meet someone that was in my age. I was 21, 22. Someone that was in my age. She wasn't even like that activist. A Palestinian woman, student. She was just released from administrative detention. And at first I realized that there is something like that. And I studied law, and I was like, but how
is this legal?
How is this legal? Yeah, like,
it's not.
Yeah, how come she doesn't know how come she didn't have a trial? And then we were speaking with her, and she said, she was explaining why she claimed somehow that she was arrested, and it was such a ridiculous thing. And I thought to myself, but I organized demonstrations that are, I know that I don't need permits for some demonstrations, but I don't ask for permits. And I going on the street, and I'm publishing all kinds of things on my Facebook page. So how come I can do it and she can't? And I thought to myself, like, we were on the same age. She's supposed to have the same life as me. How come I'm getting likes on Facebook on my demonstrations and she's getting arrested without a trial? I don't like it. It's not equal. Why? And from all of those naive moments in that sense, all those moments, and it happened really fast for me, all those moments made me realize that I can't think the same. I won't think the same as I thought before, as my society taught me, because I don't see it like that anymore. I want to live in an equal society. And the way I felt growing up, saying, okay, I'm gay, so I don't have equal rights, what does it mean? Knowing that my entire life, realizing that. So it's kind of set up on the same mindset, that why do I have those privileges that are not privileges? Again, basic. Why do I have them and she doesn't? And from that on, I think it really crashed something in me. And it really opened my eyes. And then that was the moment, some of the moments that after them, I couldn't just go back. And I became much more open and wanted to hear more and read more. And then I can't ignore the occupation anymore.
And you're talking about the freedom to protest. While you were a law student, you started this project that dealt with freedom of protest.
Yeah, it was a project called Doco Rights. And kind of we started with those demonstrations about housing and about, the people want social justice and documenting them. And we saw that, as me, I didn't grow up in those environments. I didn't know anything. I came fresh. So some people taught me the things that I knew now. But then I saw that people are coming, want to engage, experiencing police brutality, experiencing arrest, and they're going to stop being activists because of that. They're not even involved being activists because they don't know their rights. And there's not organizing around that. So that's when I started with another activist. We started this group, this project. And after when it continued to kind of develop to be a big project of different groups, different organizations working on freedom of speech, freedom of demonstration. And I started working in the Association for Civil Rights, bringing this project into the organization, and continued after that to do legal work in the organization, also working around those issues. My approach to that, and it's still my approach, that you don't need to be friends with the police. They're not your friends. And you need to be very vocal and insist on your rights, because they're not, even if there's a law giving you that, the Palestinian has this law that they can protest, right? Even though if we have these laws that allowing us to protest, doesn't mean that we will have this permission to do that. And that's why we don't need to ask for permission. So I think I really try to promote this approach of being very well known of your rights, doing all kinds of projects of documenting and encounter with police brutality, and insisting of talking about different communities that experiencing police brutality, not just when there's this in protest that everyone is talking about, but also talking about Ethiopian Jews and Mizrachion in the neighborhoods and Palestinians, of course, and different communities. I think the results of that we can see now when a lot of the groups that were against, for example, Ethiopians that were protesting against police brutality, that were against them blocking the roads, against them going to those big mass demonstrations and all of that. So we were trying to explain them why it's important to demonstrate that just because people are vocal and demanding their rights doesn't mean that they're violent. There is a difference between a vocal protest and between blocking the roads to actually being violent, the way we experienced police brutality. They were very against it. And now they're using the same services or relying on the same demands that we had back then when they were against those kinds of protests and those kinds of movements and the way they reacted, and said that there isn't police brutality, and why do you document the police? They're not doing anything wrong.
So people were against what you were doing, trying to help people protest. And now they're using the services that you were providing at the time.
Exactly. And they're relying on the same structures, even if they developed different, new structures with different lawyers, whatever, they're still relying on the same structures that we built back then.
Mm-hmm.
Pamphlets of knowing your rights, workshops, going to the Knesset,
having lawyers ready
to go
represent
in the
people.
demonstration. Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm. And during that time when you were a student, you also had this moment that kind of told you something about yourself, about your relationship to the state.
When I was in college, I think it was the first or the second year in college, there was a ceremony, which I'm not sure why I participated, for the Memorial Day of Soldiers. And there was the ceremonies, it's always kind of the same. And they're talking about how they sacrificed their life for us to be here and how heroes they were, and, all those sad songs and all those speeches about the importance of Zionism and the importance of the state that we have, and
how they died so that we could live.
Yes, it's always that, how they died so we can live, and how we need to be grateful for that, and, contribute to the army also, and all of that, which is pretty much the same services that I heard growing up. And while they were talking about it, especially the part of they needed to die for us to live, it's also this Memorial Day. It's not only for soldiers, it's also for the ones that were killed in terrorist attacks. So they were just living their life. They didn't wanted to die. They didn't enlisted. They were just sitting on the bus or in a restaurant. So while they were speaking like that, I started to feel like outrage. I felt that it's a cynical story. I felt that it's this narrative that they are promoting, that everyone is promoting, and I don't believe in it anymore. And I don't think that they should die, that they could have been saved. And what are we doing now? Like, next year I'm gonna sit in this same service, and maybe someone that's sitting with me, a student, will die to protect who exactly? Like, I really remember sitting there in this service and thinking about all those stuff and starting to be irritated. And feeling like they were sending this story that I don't want anymore, that I don't want to hear about, that I don't want that anyone will believe in it anymore, the way I believed. And then, always when in Israel they're finishing the ceremonies, there's then the national anthem. And everyone is standing to respect it and singing. And it wasn't, a provocation or something. I couldn't stand. I just felt that I physically, I can't stand to participate, kind of support in something like that, to act like it makes sense, that we're all standing now, singing, then going back to the classroom, and tomorrow someone else, we're gonna die, and we will continue to justify it like it has to. And yes, it was the first time I didn't stand and singing the Tikva, sing the national anthem. And I didn't do it since then.
And people gave you looks like, well, what are you doing? Why aren't you standing?
Yes. But I was so convinced that what I'm doing is the only thing that makes sense that I actually didn't care.
You mentioned before that you always felt different. And so this probably also had an effect on, at this point, by that time, not caring that much anymore like you used to about what people think.
I used to think that I kind of grew up in a very mainstream way, and then I'm like an error of the system, this mystery that somehow happened to have these political views right now, and left the army and all of that, and got really radicalized. And how did this happen? But I think that what actually happened is because I knew from a very early age that I'm gay, because I knew that I don't belong, that I'm a minority, and growing up realizing that, as I said, I don't have equal rights, and what it means that equal rights is the same as the story as I told before about this girl protesting and me meeting her in Hebron, realizing that we don't have the same rights. It was the same for me growing up, saying, okay, how come does my friend, my best friend, just because she's straight, she's going to have a better life than me. She's going to have less obstacles than me. So when I knew that, realizing that, I felt that I'm leaving the mainstream in a sense, without realizing that, right? But I felt that I'm leaving the mainstream in a bit. And then after I left the army, I completely felt that there was a route that everyone goes in Israel. You know, you're finishing high school, you're going to the army. After the army, you're going to this big trip to release. And then you're going back, you're going to the university, you're getting married, you're bringing kids, you know.
And they go to the army.
They go to the army. Yeah, you have this structure. And because I knew in the beginning that I won't have it, I wasn't going to get married with someone, you know, I won't have a husband. I'm not going to have children I wasn't going to have children in the traditional way. So things for me won't be traditional. And because they're not going to be traditional, and because I also left the army, so I'm definitely out of this route. So it doesn't even matter. You know, I don't need to even pretend.
You're not in there anyway, so...
I'm not in there anyway. No one sees me in there anyway. Especially versus I left the army, you know? Because if you're gay and you're going to the army, okay, they still accept you. But like, you know, for me, I was too much. And too much to digest, maybe, to say it like that. So I think from that on, I didn't feel that I need to prove anything to anyone, that I can be completely obligated to the political mission that I saw and the political beliefs that I have. And the only people that I care about, their opinion, were my close friends and my family. And my family, even though we are not sharing the same political views, we have really good relationship. And I think they respect that I care, and they're proud of me, even though sometimes I guess they used to think or still want that maybe I will choose a different path or be a bit less involved in some of the things. And as I said, we don't have the same political views, but they still support it. And when I realized that, I think it gave me that confidence that why should I care about anyone else? And, you know, when I left the army and afterward, when I became more political, when I started speaking about Mizrachi issues and the equality inside the society in Israel, and when I started to talk about Palestinians and writing against the wars, and there were many wars.
On Gaza, you mean?
On Gaza, yeah. So yeah, people wrote me, people that used to be my friends, stopped being my friends, and there were all kinds of things. But I felt that you know, I if there's something that is important to me, that I want to be honest, and I won't be hypocrite, and I won't pretend that I'm something that I'm not, so people will accept me. I have enough people that accept me for who I am.
But at a certain point, it wasn't just about accepting you or being your friend. It was actual attack. Like attack on you for being a lesbian that is also pro-Palestinian.
That is also a pro-Palestinian. To be a Mizrachi that is also a pro-Palestinian. To be a pro-Palestinian and talking about Mizrachi issues, you know, to be a leftist that insists in talking about poverty. It was all a mix. And I think that I wasn't, there aren't a lot of communities that I can actually fit entirely. And yeah, I chose for many years and still now to kind of say, okay, it's a privilege. It's not, you know, a downside. It's a privilege that I'm part of so many communities. Some I chose, some I didn't, some I was born to, but because I have those different identities, I need to use them, but I need to use them in a way to challenge all those identities together and to challenge each identity. And that means that if I'm part of the queer community, the LGBT community, that means that I'm going to challenge them, talking about occupation, talking about different communities fighting poverty, different underprivileged communities, saying that you can't fight on your own for your rights only. We need to be in solidarity with different communities. We have to do it now. And then, you know, that when there was an event, there was this new group of LGBTs trying to encourage gays to get enlisted and go to be combat soldiers and things like that. I came there, I interfered to their event, I did a campaign against them. They end up like not continuing. I'm not sure it was because of me, but I kind of like tried to challenge them as much as I can, and then also going to leftist communities and insisting with them that they need to be more accepted and they need to also do work related to poverty and to different communities, not just to talk about the Palestinians or the refugees because it's more convenient to them. They need to challenge themselves and they need to understand that they will have to give something. Like if we're talking about distributive justice, that means that they will have to give up of some of their privileges. But this is how you create an equal society. You're changing the status quo and you're building a new one.
So you went to an event where someone from the LGBT community attacked you physically because of this.
Yeah. It was during COVID. There wasn't a march in Tel Aviv. Like there isn't like the famous march in Tel Aviv.
The Pride
March. Yeah. So they did this event, and the event they invited officials to speak. And it was back then when there were threats of evictions of a neighborhood in Tel Aviv, Givat Amal, a Mizrachion neighborhood, to build a fancy, skyscrapers. And there was police brutality back then against Ethiopians. There were a few cases of murdering young Ethiopians in the neighborhood, and police brutality in demonstrations, and the Palestinians in the West Bank. There were all kinds of things that's going on. And we went as a group talking about pink washing, talking about those issues inside this Pride event. And this is something that we did before. Even before I was involved, people used to go to these Pride parades and like protesting in different groups, trying to provoke the community to be more outspoken.
More political.
More political, yeah. To politicize them, not just to party and not just to think about themselves. And when we were there, it was also that the atmosphere in Israel was very intense. One of the protesters that were part of this group that came to talk about pink wash and those other issues, he came with a Palestinian flag. And when he came, and also even before that, when they saw us, they were very mad, other participants in the event. They were very mad that again we came to ruin the party, and they started to try to use physical violence. And when I was trying to block, in a non-violent way, but just like standing and block. So when I was trying to block the attacker from attacking a woman that was holding the flag, standing with her child.
A Palestinian flag.
A Palestinian flag, yeah. So he attacked me.
Like you were trying to defend this woman,
yeah.
And so he attacked you.
He attacked me, yeah. I was just standing there, and he attacked me, and it was like a very brutal attack. I think it was very violent, and I got a concussion, and I was very injured, and it took me months of recovery. And when I insisted that the police would arrest him, they wanted to arrest me. And then now it's a case that runs many years now, a few years since COVID, since 2020.
The case is still open?
So what happened to that's again to realizing, and it's just me and I have political power and people know me, but they still did it to me. So to imagine what they're doing to other people. So I wanted to file a police charge against him. And they refused in the beginning. And then when they said, okay, they encouraged him to press charges against me also, even though he said he doesn't want to. But they continually called him the police, okay, actively. Called him several times, told him, no, you should press charges, because they know me, okay, because they know me. They read my files, they know me, they Googled me, they know me. They know me even personally, some of them.
The police,
the officers there on ground. And then he ended up pressing charges also. And they prosecute both of us. Like we were fighting, like we were just like it was a street fight. And they told me like, you can pay 500 shekels and we won't press charges. Like to cut a deal with me. Okay?
Basically bribing you.
And I said no. In the end, they dropped the charges against me and they cut a deal with him. So he paid 500 shekels as a fine. I didn't even get the money.
Yeah, it wasn't compensation for you.
It wasn't compensation at all. So I decided not to give up, not just because it's my own personal thing, because, it's not just something between us. It's not, I don't know him, he doesn't know me.
It's a phenomenon.
Yeah, it's a phenomenon. And because it was the first time that something like that happened, also inside the LGBT community, something like that, so I decided to continue and pursue it. And now it's on the Supreme Court. I'm waiting for the decision of the Supreme Court about it, which is something that is relevant to a lot of activists. The resolutions of something like that.
Because it might be a precedent.
Yes, it might be a precedent. And also to prove that if you're doing something like that, it's true, there are not going to be consequences by the state, but we will do as much as we can to make sure that there will be consequences. Publicly, legally, financially, whatever. But there are going to be some consequences. Otherwise, what do people understand from that? The same as the settlers, that they can do whatever they want. No one cares.
No accountability.
No accountability. And the state is backing them up. So why not? So what's going to prevent them to doing it again? And the whole discussion, remember that a lot of the discussion was not if the violence, it was if the violence was justified or not, because of the Palestinian flag. Because it's the enemy flag, because we bought it.
So they were assuming that it might have been actually legitimate to physically assault you because you were defending someone holding a Palestinian flag.
Yes, and that was the case. In the end, it was, why are we involving the Palestinian agenda? Why are we talking about pink washing? Why are we insisting, continuing talking about it for so many years? Because the occupation is for so many years and the situation is so many years, so we are continuing doing it. But for them, for many people, they kind of blamed me.
Victim blaming of if you didn't want to get brutally attacked. You shouldn't have been defending someone with a Palestinian flag.
Exactly. That was the conversation.
Victim blaming 101.
And after that, I wanted to be, continue encouraging people to continue going to those demonstrations and insisting on our values and continue the conversation. But it was very hard because I felt that even though I got support, many won't have it. And it's very frightening going to those demonstrations and being attacked from your own community. It's not just the Israeli community. Mm-hmm. It's the Israeli LGBT community. It's so small and so close and so sensitive. And knowing that someone like that will attack you and then people will back him up.
The police will back him up.
The police will back him up. Yeah, but also publicly, you will back him up. 2 years afterwards, he was dancing. He was invited to dance in the Pride event, the official Tel Aviv Pride event.
Okay, he's like a professional dancer or something?
No, he was friends with someone or whatever.
What do you mean that's on one of the trucks?
Dance on one of the trunks and participates in one of the clips or something like that.
Something official that he was invited to.
It was something official, even though when you Google his name, you're going to find out about the story and everyone knew about it. But they backed him, even though they knew that I was very active for a lot of years now in different organizations, initiatives related to the LGBTQ rights. And it was just someone who participated in the demonstration. They backed him up because they are so afraid of having this discussion about pink washing. And they so concerned and so mad about us continuing. And I'm continuing to be a party pooper. But to be honest, I'm less invited to the official events that I used to be invited before that, because people, they don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that. They just want to speak about, they don't want to hear about solidarity between struggles. They don't want to hear about different communities. They want to feel that if the government is supporting them, so it's all good. Now, when the government that we have is very conservative and they're very racist, and they're very homophobic, of course, because it's all going together historically. So you can see that they're a bit more vocal, they're more active, okay? When we were telling them, listen, it's gonna be on you also, wake up, they said, no, it's all good. Now we see the results.
And in 2020, you also formed Breaking Walls.
Yes.
That's a very challenging time to open a new organization.
Yes, especially when it's a grassroots organization working on issues related to poverty, trying to do it with populations and leaders fighting poverty, not just to speak on their behalf, but work with them. Yes, it was very challenging. Actually, like I was a lawyer working and being activist on my free time, in a way. For several years before that, I was doing all kinds of campaigns, but I was working as a human rights lawyer, and issues related to poverty, issues related to freedom to demonstrate, but I mainly use this legal tool, and it didn't took me a while to realize that I don't like it at all. Like, I don't like just to use the legal tool because it's not working. It's not working in our legal system, maybe as a whole, but it's not working, and it's not enough. And as a lawyer, I think I was even now, I'm still a lawyer, I'm still working as a lawyer, I was very creative in the way I organized. Like, if I sent a letter and I didn't get a response, I made sure that I would get a response in all ways needed, whatever needed. And then when it was 2020, I was leading a campaign for releasing of someone named Dalal Daoud. She killed her abusive husband. She's a Palestinian citizen of Israel, and she was incarcerated for 18 years.
For killing her husband that had abused her for years.
For years, yes.
Crazy story. We'll put a link.
Yes, and there were a few cases like that. 3 were released, including Dalal. One hopefully is on the go sometime. But yeah, so with Dalal, I discovered about her story from a different campaign that I did a few years before that, of Jonathan Ado, that also killed his rapist, the man that raped him. It was also a very complicated story. From this campaign of Jonathan Ado, rest in peace, from this campaign, I knew about other stories, also the story of Dalal. And then I met her. It was 2018 or something, I think. I met her to hear her story, and I said, okay, she had to be released. I met her. I saw an amazing woman, a leader, a community leader, and I couldn't believe that she's still in prison for so many years. And I was leading a campaign to release her. During the campaign, like the last outcome of that was a demonstration outside of the court, when there was a discussion, hearing to decide if to release her or not. And when there were like hundreds of people in the demonstration, people that took the day off to come, people that didn't know her, of course. But there was like a shift in the discussion about her not being a murderer, about how it was like she was protecting herself, and talking about domestic violence, and especially in the Palestinian communities, and what does it mean that you're reaching out to the police but they don't care because you're a Palestinian or a woman. Anyway, we did this campaign. It was very successful. There was like suddenly a shift in the public opinion. And then when they said, okay, she's going to be released, I said, okay, it's much more effective than being a lawyer. Now I understand that. I don't want just to be a lawyer. I want to be full-time doing grassroots activism. And I want to use different tools in order to organize. And I want to be in a position that I'm managing to have political power to our communities that are always, need to kind of like fight for the crumbs and always needed to survive. So that's when we established Breaking Walls as a feminist organization, as a Mizrachi organization, as a queer organization, and none of the above. Like, it was something that we wanted that everyone will feel comfortable being part of it, but we were targeting specific communities, and we established that with many of the communities and the activists that were working with us since 2011.
Like all the different campaigns and projects that you've already been involved with and that you led, those people that were in that with you kind of came along.
Yeah, they came along. They came along as donors, as activists, as leaders of that movement.
That's amazing. Like, break that wall of the divide and conquer.
Yeah, you can see it like that. Break the wall, or we were talking about, that for the women that cannot yet break the glass ceilings, the one that needs to break many walls before they can actually
reach the ceiling.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing. So we've been talking for a long time, Sapir, and you have so much experience in leading struggles for many different communities, and it's really inspiring. I also want to hear about this very recent struggle that you led, trying to stop the settlers from blocking aid trucks reaching Gaza.
Yes.
And this was also on the news. This reached international attention. We can put some links in the show notes to different interviews with you about what you did there. But for now, we're going to send whoever wants to hear that conversation about that very recent struggle to the Patreon page. So if anyone wants to hear more of Sapir talking about how she went to stop people from blocking the aid trucks from reaching Gaza.
Unsuccessfully managing to stop them, but successfully managing to target them.
Yeah.
International attention.
Yeah. The success was in making people notice that this is a real problem and it needs to be stopped. So yeah, it's a pretty amazing story. I'm going to send you guys to go listen to this bonus episode where we're going to be talking about that in the podcast's Patreon. There's a link in the show notes as well. I'd really appreciate it if you want to support this podcast and hear more of these conversations. It really helps me bring them more and more. And I want to thank all those Patreon supporters that have already given so much and helped me a lot. So thank you very, very much. And thank you, Sapir. I have to say you're like a huge inspiration for me when it comes to activism.
Thank you.
And we first met back in 2014, I think it was, around the struggle to release Yonatan Hailo from prison, which we mentioned earlier. And since then, I've been following you, and just like everything is always so aligned when it comes to what you do and what you say. And I really learned a lot from you about activism. So if people ask themselves how I became the activist that I am today, one of the answers is Sapir.
Thank you. I'm not sure if it's a compliment. It's not
Definitely it is.
It's not that fun doing that kind of work. But I think that, so I don't want to take full responsibility. But I hope that you don't regret.
No, definitely. I don't regret. So thank you.
Thank you.